In this video, we're going to cover off some warm-up techniques around the shoulder, starting with some warm-up techniques with the patient lying on their back. So here, I'm very simply scooping around the deltoid using a flat hand, so I've got that effleurage approach just to warm up the soft tissue and get the client used to the hands-on treatment. We simply flow up over the anterior deltoid, maintain good contact as we swing round and come back down the posterior deltoid, working from the upper arm up over the shoulder and back down. This is a nice warm-up technique. Whilst we're here, we can also come into the chest a little bit. We're going to do some more specific chest techniques, but whilst we're here, we can just do a simple warm-up by passing the palm over the chest towards the shoulder. Again, just warming up the soft tissue and starting to mobilize that pectoralis major a little bit underneath the hand. When you're massaging over the chest, it's also an option to do some gentle passive motion of the shoulder in a pain-free range. From the chest, I'll move out over the deltoid and just do some petrissage using the base of my palm and my fingers hooking behind the deltoid there. I can just mobilize the deltoid tissue posteriorly, a little bit more vigorous than the effleurage warm-up. And for the final one in this position, I'm going to come above the patient, and if appropriate, I'm going to elevate the patient's arm. If that's not appropriate, if that's too painful, then you may want to leave this technique out. So arm elevated in a comfortable and relaxed position. We then come down behind the patient, and on this couch I've got the luxury of dropping the side down, which creates space for my hand. And that's what I really like about this 7-section couch, is these drop sides that just create this extra space to help with your manual therapy. Without those though, you simply want to scoop your hand between the patient's shoulder blade and the couch. From there, bring it up over the deltoid and then come back down over the lats, scoop round the back and back up over the shoulder again. Performing that technique 5 or 6 times to warm up the area. Next, let's progress by turning the patient onto their front. Now we've turned the client onto their front to continue with the warm-up techniques. Now you may be wondering what sort of emollient or wax that I'm using. I prefer to use a drier wax, of which there's many different types available, but I have here with me some rock rub, which is a very inert, fairly dry wax to use. And I like to use that because it's much easier then to do other forms of manual therapy because it doesn't spread and it's not too slippery. I do sometimes use oil, but I find with oil that although there's obviously less friction, it's easy to do the techniques. If you're then trying to get some purchase on the skin for more mobilization-centered approaches, then it's very difficult because once the oil's on there, it's hard to get any kind of grip over the soft tissue. So I tend to avoid using oil in most cases. If the wax I'm using is not quite enough and the skin's quite dry and it's quite hard going, then I would use some massage cream. And I've put a bit of massage cream on Richard's back here. In fact, I might just need a little bit more, because with these warm-up techniques, you're doing large movements with using the flat of your hand. So if there's too much friction between your hand and the skin, it can be hard work for you as the therapist. And just making sure I warm up there with some simple effleurage moving into petrissage techniques. I can also then come down, hold onto the scapula there, come down over the lower scapula, grab a hold of some of the lat tissue, bring that up as I then push down out over the scapula towards the back of the shoulder. So this is a nice warm-up technique. A bit more friction going on here, so there's a bit more warming going on as a result of that. And then I'll move the patient's arm up into elevation. And on this couch, on the 7-section Pro, we can drop that down, which allows me to rest the client's arm there. And then I can come down over the back of the shoulder, come down over the lats and back up and continue the warm-up technique like so. Now we've moved the client onto their side. I know what you're thinking, it's the wrong shoulder, but obviously just for the camera, it works better to be this way round, more comfortable for the patient. So, patient on their side, continuing to work on the shoulder. Effleurage techniques using the flat of the hand, so you've got a large contact point between you and the skin, and we're coming down over the deltoid, over the lats, and down towards that thoracolumbar fascia. Holding the arm so the patient's nice and relaxed. Their knees are bent so they're stable, there's a pillow under their head so they're comfortable, and it's also not stressful for you as the therapist. So pay attention to your own positioning. Make sure you stand with a wide stance and get your legs involved rather than standing too tall and bending over, which can put unnecessary stress on your back and leave you feeling a bit fatigued after you've treated a few people. Also, throughout this course, I want to raise awareness and get you to pay attention to how you're using your hands. Try not to use your thumbs too much. So there'll be very few techniques on this course where you're just using your thumbs. And that's because a lot of manual therapists suffer from fatigue and pain that affects their work from overusing their thumbs. So we're going to try to use other parts of the hand and upper body instead. Here, for example, rather than using the hand, we could switch to using the forearm, bring the forearm down over the shoulder and across the back. Because we're working over a large flat area, using the forearm makes sense and is comfortable for both you and the client. When you're doing this technique, you can get the client to roll towards you a little bit, so there's a bit of rotation through their spine. That will flatten out the back of the shoulder even more, and you can continue with a few warm-up sweeps over the back before we progress on to something more specific. So we'll finish off with this technique here, just using my lower forearm to glide up over the upper traps into the neck. And this concludes our warm-up techniques, and we're now going to go on to look at some more specific techniques for certain parts of the shoulder and specific dysfunctions. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Perhaps go back through and watch some of it again if you need a recap. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video.